So hello, everybody out there. This is Christine Disco. I'm a managing director within Accenture. I lead up our technology, strategy, and advisory practice in the Northeast. I'm based in Boston, and I'm very excited to be here today with Rana Kaliouby. So Rana is a pioneer in artificial emotional intelligence, which we're going to talk lots about today, as well as the co-founder and CEO of Affectiva, an AI startup that spun off from the MIT Media Lab in 2009. She grew up in Kuwait and Cairo, Egypt, and earned her undergraduate and master's degrees from the American University in Cairo and a PhD from Cambridge University. And in addition to being an accomplished scientist, she's also the author of Girl Decoded, which I have right here marked up, and memoir of her quest to bring emotion to AI, and a single mother of 2 children. So excited to hear from you today and to be with you, Rana, and welcome.
Hi, Christine. Thank you for having me, and happy International Women's Day.
I am excited to hear your story, but before we even dive into your story, just so that we can all be grounded, tell me, what is emotion AI and why is it important now more than ever?
Yes, I've been on this mission to humanize technology for the past 20 plus years, and particularly by bringing emotional intelligence to our technology. So if you think about it, technology and AI in particular is becoming mainstream. It's taking on roles that were traditionally done by humans. For example, acting as your, maybe helping with your scheduling and you're being your assistant, helping you with productivity, helping with your healthcare, helping us be happier and healthier people, right? But the emphasis on building these technologies continues to be the IQ of technology. And I'm here to basically say, well, if you look at human intelligence, our EQ matters just as much. And so I'm on this mission to inject our technologies, our devices, how we think about how we connect and communicate by kind of reprioritizing and building EQ into tech.
That's awesome. So can you tell me a little bit about what first ignited your passion in this topic?
So I grew up in a house of 2 technologists. Both my parents are in tech. They actually met at a programming class where my dad taught my mom COBOL, which is an extinct programming language, but that's how they met. And so I've always been surrounded by the latest and greatest technologies growing up. And what always struck me was how these technologies brought our family together. So I'm not a gamer, but I grew up with Atari gaming console, and we played a lot of games. Yeah, dating ourselves here.
Yeah, I love it.
It was a way of bringing me and my sisters together, and I've just always been fascinated by how technology has the opportunity to connect people in entirely new ways. So that's been a thread that's been common throughout my career. I also grew up in the Middle East, where people are very animated, and so 90% of how we communicate is nonverbal. Only 10% is in the actual choice of words we use. The 90% is your facial expressions, right? Your face, your hand gestures, the tone of your voice. So, and again, that's completely missing from our computer mediated connections. So I wanted to be able to quantify that and bring it to our tech world. The aha moment for me, that set me on this path of building emotion AI, was back when I was a new PhD student at Cambridge University. And it was my first experience moving away from home, Cairo at the time. And I realized I was spending more time in front of my device than I did with any other person. Yet this device was very oblivious to how I felt. But even worse, I think, it was the main portal of communication with my family back home. Yet all of these nonverbals were lost in cyberspace, right? Because it's, the best you can do is send an emoji. And fast forward 20 years to this last year through the pandemic, where we are all, we're socially distanced and we're kind of connecting digitally. I feel like these connections, I'm super grateful to all of these virtual video conferencing platforms, but they're still very rudimentary if you think about it, right? Compared to a good old face-to-face conversation. So I think we're going to see a lot of innovation to bring technology like ours into these platforms to quantify, to personalize some of these digital connections and communications.
Well, so hopefully that'll actually spur some need and investment, towards actually getting this more integrated into technology, given that the need is so high now and will probably stay for the foreseeable future, I would think. Given that there's this great need, have you seen there's actually been resistance to having emotion integrated into technology? And if so, why have you seen that, and why?
When I first started doing this research, and specifically at MIT, when we were spinning Affectiva out of the MIT Media Lab, there was definitely less understanding and appreciation for the role that emotions play in our everyday lives. Our emotions influence every aspect of what we do, from how we connect and communicate, how we make decisions, no matter how big or small the decision is, how we learn. It influences our memory, like everything, right? But I remember when we were initially pitching Affectiva to investors, we actually avoided using the word emotions altogether. We called the company Affectiva because it's a play on the word affect, which is a synonym of emotions, but it's less feminine, because we were primarily pitching to, older white guys who maybe did not really appreciate the importance of emotions in our lives. I do think this is changing, though, especially in the past year. I think there's a realization that, empathy is really key. It's really important that we empathize with one another, and that's how you build loyalty and trust and connection. And there's more celebration of the importance that emotions play in our lives. So I like that.
Do you see gender bias affecting AI, and maybe share a little bit of how you've seen that, and what does that actually mean? How do you see that manifested?
Absolutely. And that's one of my main concerns of how we bring AI technologies to market. And I know Accenture is really big on that as well. That's kind of where the shared core values, I'd say, come into play. Our core technology essentially leverages a camera sensor, and we use deep learning and computer vision and tons of data to train algorithms to recognize people's faces and then map the expressions into a number of emotions and mental states. The problem is, if your data is not diverse, then these algorithms are going to be biased. And I'm sure you've followed over the past 18 months or so, there's been a lot of backlash against facial recognition technologies that were trained primarily on a predominantly white male data set, and then they won't work on somebody that looks like me, right? Because the algorithm has never seen anybody that looks like me.
Right.
So it's so key that we think about the diversity of the data, that we consider the diversity of the data and how we train and validate these algorithms. And at the core of it all, honestly, the team that's designing these algorithms needs to be diverse, because we each have our own blind spots. And unless we have, diverse points of views around the table, we're going to end up, with biased technology. So that's something we prioritize. We're very intentional about it. It's tied to my executive team's goals that we ensure that our algorithms are not. So we have, our bonus plan is tied to like revenue and EBITDA and mitigating bias in our algorithms. So it's something that's really top of mind for us as a company.
I like how you said it's not just the data, it's the team, right? So the data, of course, has to be diverse, but by pulling it into your actual team on the ground to make it happen, it takes it a step further, I think, than what I've seen a lot of companies doing, and hopefully becomes more of the norm of expectation for building this technology, which is great. I'd love to hear a little bit around what you think some of the applications that you're targeted at, but also a little bit around the things that you've said that you won't do because you want to make sure that the technology is used for good, I would say. Could you share a little bit about both sides of that?
What is really exciting, I think, about our technologies, I fundamentally believe that this is going to be the de facto human-machine interface in the future, and we're already on a path to get there. Which means that there are so many applications of it. We started with autism at MIT, and now, we're very focused on the automotive industry to measure driver drowsiness and distraction. There's applications in mental health, in education, in retail, but also in applications where I think we have to really think hard about whether we want to, as a society, go there. So when we first spun out of MIT, Roz Picard, who's an MIT professor, and she's my co-founder, and myself, we got together around her kitchen table and we said, okay, how are we going to make a decision on which business do we take on and which business do we turn away? And so we defined a number of core values: privacy, opt-in and consent, ensuring that people get something in return for sharing this very private data. And we literally outlined them, and we use those set of core values almost like our North Star to make business decisions. So, this was in 2009. In 2011, we were raising money for the company. We were about a couple of months away from running out of not making payroll. So it was really stressful. And we got this cold call from the venture arm of an intelligence agency. And they said, we were raising maybe like less than $10 million at the time. And they said, we'll give you $40 million on condition that you pivot the company to focus on surveillance applications. And it was in one way a hard decision, because if we didn't take that money, we might just run out of money altogether, right? And cease to exist. But I remember going back and kind of rethinking those core values and revisiting them. And it just did not at all, we wouldn't have an opportunity to opt people in. People may not consent. There's a lot of, potential for abuse and discrimination. And so we turned that funding away and hunkered down and found investors who shared our mission and our core values. And, fast forward, whatever, 8-9 years on, we're still here and still growing. Yeah. So it's so important to be clear about what those core values are, because they matter when it's the hardest. Do you know what I mean?
Right. And really having that is that you stuck to it is amazing. And it is. They're not there just to be just to be on the wall. They're there to really help you guide the company and make the decisions that you need to make. And so I love that story. It's such a inspiring story of don't take the easy way out, in terms of, sticking to what you believe in.
I also think, and to everybody who's joining us, we are all thought leaders in our own domains, right? And we are almost setting the bar for what the world needs to look like. So I think of myself as a steward for this technology. I invented it, and it's almost my responsibility beyond even my company, right? To make sure that it's applied in the right way. So I spend a lot of time just evangelizing the importance of the ethical development and deployment of AI again. And it may not translate to business for Affectiva, but as a technology steward, I think it's so important.
If you don't mind, I'd love for you to share, when we were talking a few days ago to prepare for this, you shared some stories around how you became CEO. And I'd love if you could maybe share with the group here a little bit about that, especially in the light of International Women's Day.
Yes. So when we first spun out, again, based on technology Roz and I had built, we were encouraged by our early investors to hire a CEO to run the company. So my role was CTO. And we did that for a number of years. And then the CEO decided to move on. So the question became, all righty, who's going to be the next CEO? And a few members of our board said, Rana should be, it's her baby, it's her technology. This was in 2013. And I remember thinking, that voice in my head, right, was like, no, you're not going to be, you're going to fail miserably. You cannot raise your hands for this. And so I went back the next day and I told the board, I don't think I can do it. Now, interestingly, our head of sales at the time, who had only been with the company for a year, and he also had never been CEO, he was like, I'll take it. and he stepped into the CEO role, right? Which is, it's classic.
Classic, absolutely classic.
Women, I mean, not just women, but I think there's a disproportionate amount of women who do not raise their hands until they're sure they click, check 100% of the boxes. And I didn't. So, I didn't check the boxes and I didn't think I could do it. Now, fast forward to 2015, I was flying back from my TED Talk and I was like, wow, I wonder what the roles and responsibilities of a CEO is. And I Googled it and I created this bullet list. And literally, as I was creating the list, it hit me that I was already doing the job. I was evangelizing the tech category. I was very close to our clients and our customers. I was raising money for the company. I was hiring our R&D team. And so, right? And so I was like, wow,
you're absolutely doing the job.
Doing this job. So it took me to believe in myself first. And once I did that, I went to our CEO at the time and I said, hey, I think I'm ready. Obviously it took a lot of back and forth, but then we took it to the board and it was a unanimous vote and I stepped into the role. And so my biggest, I guess, advice to all of you listening, don't be the biggest obstacle in your own way, right? There's enough obstacles out there. Don't be your own biggest obstacle. So
yeah, I think that's you're clearly so successful, and seeing everything that you've done to share that story, hopefully it inspires others, because it is when you first told me the story, I thought you were going to tell me that you didn't even get asked, which is often what people think, that maybe women don't get asked as much. You were actually asked and you held yourself back, which is again also classic. The term we talk about, imposter syndrome. It's just when somebody first told me that term not too long ago, actually, I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what we all feel like. I shouldn't be here. I'm not good enough, but you absolutely are. So it's a very inspiring story, and glad to see that it's clearly panned out and working out well. In this vein, what do you think we need to do to better support women overall, but in STEM in particular?
I think there's a number of things we can do. First, as women who are in positions to be leaders and managers and pay it forward, right? I think that's been super important and front of mind for me personally. I would encourage women out there to network. It is something that I didn't prioritize in my career. And looking back, I think men do that really well. They build that personal board of advisors. They build that these connections that they can tap into. And so I just encourage women to be out there, right? Whether it's a meetup or it's a business, business meetup. There's a lot of conferences and events and communities now that support women. So I encourage women to kind of join those. I think the third one is to just believe in yourself, honestly, right? Just have more confidence in yourself. And for me, it's a combination of doing a lot of things, but I journal a lot and I use my journal as a way to celebrate successes, but also have a rebuttal with myself, right? If this imposter syndrome comes, is like top of mind, I just have a conversation with myself in my journal, like, oh, you are not going to be able to raise that next round of funding. Well, let me tell you why I think I can, right? I've done this 5 times before, but believe in yourself.
If you don't mind, I'd love to talk a little bit about your role as a mom.
So I have 2 kids. Jana is now 17 and Adam is 12. So literally when we founded Affectiva, Adam was a baby and I would have to schlep him with me all over to all these investment meetings and stuff.
Those were the stories that I loved the most, when you were saying you let him on, like you left him with, you left him with the receptionist when you had to go to your first pitch meeting. That's amazing.
my babysitter, this was in the Bay Area. So I live in Boston, but we did the whole Sand Hill Roadshow in the Bay Area. And my babysitter fell through. So I was like, well, I can't reschedule these meetings. They took months to put in place. So I literally showed up with Adam in the car seat and I told the receptionist, who was a really sweet young woman, I was like, okay, there you go. He's a great baby. Hopefully he won't make any noises. See you in an hour. But you got to do it, right?
You got to do what you got to do.
You got to do what you got to do. That's what we're all figuring out. But I think it's so important to normalize, it's okay if your kid shows up on a Zoom call, that's fine. Or it's okay if you have to excuse yourself because, you need to take care of family business. I haven't, over the years always done that well. I think in retrospect, I mean, I'm divorced now, and in retrospect, at points in time, it was so hard to turn Affectiva off. It's literally like my 3rd kid. I've gotten a little bit better at it, but it's still kind of often out of balance, like it is for a lot of us. And I've just become a lot more mindful and mindful for my team too, right? I think that, this is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and it's important that we acknowledge that people have stuff going on in their lives. So
that's absolutely leading by example, which is hard because we often try to, make sure everybody else is okay. But to your point, don't necessarily take care of yourself, but everybody's looking at you and me as leaders. So we need to demonstrate. So it's a good reminder. If you wouldn't mind sharing, what's a piece of advice that you've given to your teenage daughter now that she's 17 and, coming almost, going to college and all of that?
Yeah, my 17-year-old is just so empowered, and I'm so proud of her. I'd like to take a little bit of credit for that. But
Absolutely.
I think again, kids, look at us and see it's less about what we say and it's more about what we do, right? And so I would like to believe that I've been a role model in showing her that I can be empowered, that my voice matters. I'm going to use my voice as a platform for change and to pay it forward. And so she's very, I don't know if this is with all teenagers nowadays, but she's very kind of she's a social justice warrior, right? And I think, we talk a lot about how important it is to be part of a community, to the networking again, right? I always tell her, and also one of my mantras is, you miss 100% of the shots you don't try. So she'll often say, well, I really want to intern with so-and-so. I'm like, email them. What's the worst that will happen? They'll never get back to you. And more often than not, she'll hear back and she was like, wow. They just I was like, exactly. So just being a advocating for yourself, being a go-getter, believing in yourself. And I think these are all elements that I've been kind of prioritizing.
Okay. Well, Rana, this has been so much fun. I know we could talk for hours and I would love to keep talking with you, but I wanted to say for now, thank you so much for spending the time with me, for sharing your story. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I'm very excited to see this technology become just, part of the core of every solution that we put out there. And again, we are an appreciation for your time. We are absolutely honored to dedicate 500 of your books to organizations like Girls Who Code and continuing to encourage young women. And I'm excited to share this interview with our team at Accenture and with everybody out there. So thank you again so much for your time. It's been wonderful meeting you.
Thank you so much again, and I hope this is the beginning of a friendship and an awesome work. And happy International Women's Day.